Toyina will wala bibor, binding William. Toyin Juba, wala Tori, hey am yo, binding William. Toyin Benti, wala Kwaju, hey wow, binding William. Toyin Malkal, wala Pinyaram, binding William.
Okay, welcome everybody. Welcome to Elkhazin Media. Let me welcome Professor Elkhazin to Elkhazin Media. Thank you, Professor, for accepting our invitation to come to talk about the issues going on in Sudan and South Sudan. And for those of you who are watching Facebook and YouTube, please share the video while we start. Let me start to welcome my guest, Professor Elkhazin. Professor Elkhazin, can you give us your introduction before we dive into our conversation this morning?
Thank you for hosting me. This is not the first time. I am always ready to respond to your requests. I am Professor Taj Elkhazin, professor at Carleton University in Ottawa, Canada. And for 50 years, I have been engaged in issues of Sudan, South Sudan, and the Horn of Africa in general. And this is an important session for us because there are issues in Sudan and there are issues in South Sudan as well. And there are issues in the relationship between them. And this is what we are going to explore today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Elkhazin. Actually, it has been almost 2 months since the war break out in Sudan. And for that, there's a lot of things going on. My question to you, can you, what is your point of view about the situation going on in Sudan, the war? Who do you think will take over the power? And between General Hameti and President General Buran, who do you think will control the power at this moment?
When there is a level 4 violence, as we have in Sudan now, level 4 violence is the highest level of violence when there are incidences like what we have in Sudan now. And this is what is happening in the capital, Darfur, and now in Kordofan. And people who want to go beyond, we call these manifestations. When you have a conflict, you have root causes for the conflict, and you have the manifestations, the byproducts of the conflict. And when you want to intervene, when you want to analyze, we have got to differentiate between the two. So the underlying reasons have not been explored yet. That needs a research, professional research. Why did the war break out in the first place? Is it the fragility of the state of Sudan? Sudan has been a fragile state, and South Sudan. They have been fragile states for over 20 years, and they shall continue to be fragile states until 2050. That's not a theory. That's taken from the data of the two countries. So is that a reason? Sudan is a state, but not a nation state. There are 65 different ethnic groups in Sudan. So there is no cross-cutting homogeneity as you find in Bangladesh or Portugal or Japan or Greece, where they are the same people, the same language, the same religion, the same origins, and so on. That's not the case of Sudan. So the war, there is no war that is senseless. People don't say that requires research. The answer to your second part of the question, the Sudanese armed forces are 225,000 strong. They are the fifth or the sixth strongest army in Africa. They were established in 1925. So there is no way, absolutely no way, that a militia that of the Rapid Support Service forces can actually defeat They might prolong the war, but they cannot defeat the Sudanese armed forces. I hope this is useful to your listeners. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Actually, last week I saw your video that you post on YouTube channel, your YouTube channel, and you talk about the what South Sudan and Sudan will do to for the relationship between them. What do you think regarding relationship between South Sudan and Sudan at this time? What the relationship going on between? What do you think South Sudan can do toward the crisis going on in Sudan? As you know, what happened in Sudan will affect South Sudan, and what happened in South Sudan will affect Sudan. Both two countries they need one another. So, what do you think South Sudan can do regarding the crisis, humanitarian, and bring peace and others going on? What do you think South Sudan government, Juba government, can do?
This is a strategic question, and strategic questions need to be answered with honesty and clarity. So I am not going to mince my words, and I'm going to call a spade a spade. That is the only way we can go forward. There are two incidences that happened lately. One of them is the movement of Abdulaziz Al Hilu on Kadugli, and now he's encircling Diling. Diling is almost close to Lubayet. And the lifeline of Abdulaziz Al Hilu is South Sudan. And Abdulaziz Al Hilu was in Juba last week. We and I would have expected that the government of South Sudan would have told him not to step the Sudanese armed forces in the back. That's what he did. He took the opportunity while there is an ongoing war between the two parties and the Sudanese armed forces are gaining the upper hand day by day. Abdulaziz Al Hilu moves on and he takes four garrisons in South Kordofan. Then he encircles Katugli and now he's encircling Diling. What is the South Sudan doing on that? Why doesn't the president tell him that's treachery? That's not the right thing to do. Not to abrogate the ceasefire agreement between the center and Al Hilo. That's one. The other one, which is more serious, while most of us were encouraging the participation of His Excellency President Salva Kiir to lead any mediation, not really under the IGAD. I mean, the Sudan, South Sudan don't need a mediator. They don't need a platform. The platform is there. You and I are talking now and we understand each other very well. The day before yesterday, the acting Minister of Foreign Affairs wrote a very ugly letter to the IGAD and he copied the Kenyan Foreign Ministry, while Khartoum has bluntly rejected any intervention by General, by Governor, by President Ruto, and by Kenya in general. Why on earth would South Sudan bring that into play and then they designate an envoy, the envoy of the IGAD to Sudan is now a South Sudanese? That's shameful. And that was not done in cooperation with Khartoum. And once this is revealed, Khartoum will be upset. And they have the right. If I were Khartoum, I will withdraw my ambassador from Juba and I will sack the South Sudanese ambassador from Khartoum. So, coming to your question, in my last, the before last video, the one South Sudan relations and a hot tin roof, I did give the government of South Sudan my advice as an expert on the Horn of Africa. And I was as blunt as a civilized man could be. Clearly, I suggested to the president that Mr. Tutgatlwag should be removed from the file, and I have got my reasons and I have got my proof why that should why that should happen. Uh, I advise that envoys from any party dealing with Sudan are not to meet the president. We want to keep him clear. We want to keep him impartial. We want to keep him in the good books of the people of the North. Otherwise, someone who is not credible, someone who is not neutral, someone who is not sympathetic can never be a mediator. And we want to reserve that honored place for him, the same as the honored place we have for him in our hearts. I also advise them that no one is to meet the president on this issue. They meet the Ministry of Foreign Affairs or anybody else. The president is not to come into the day-to-day issues. Otherwise, his grace will be diluted. And my main advice was for South Sudan to stop the lip service. That's what the North has been getting so far, and to put their wallet where their mouth is. And I suggest is that South Sudan loans Sudan 5 million barrels or any figure, but a gesture that we feel the situation is tight. We are here to help, but not lip service. No more. I also suggested that South Sudan openly supports the IOM and the UNHCR to host and honorably treat the 80,000 South Sudanese that have flocked into Juba, not to put them in camps, not to consider them as refugees. Sudan did not consider the South Sudanese as refugees, even during the bad days of Bashir. He came out openly and he dictated as president of the country that the South Sudanese are guests over here, respectable guests. They have all the rights. He refused to put them in camps, at least reciprocate. And we also, I also advise South Sudan to have a think tank because a lot of the issues are not day-to-day politics. They are not the business as usual. It's a very intricate file. You are talking about 11, 12 million people in South Sudan and over 40 million people in Sudan. And we are talking, you and I are talking, and I'm talking to a lot of my sisters and brothers. My videos are generating responses, sometimes 400 responses, all of them cementing and confirming that more needs to be done. So those were the advices that went on the record to South Sudan, and I am told that the video on that was actually delivered to the president's office. I hope you will have the chance to see it, and I hope this answers your question. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Taikazin. Actually, you mentioned something about you advised President to reveal Tutgalwa, and you said that you have your reason. Can you share with that your reason why you want President to reveal Tutgalwa? President,
Hemeti,
yeah.
it is, yeah, it is, sorry, it is the intimate relationship between Tutgatalwag and Hemeti. Uh, Kenya and Kenyan president is alleged to be involved in that. The business relations, the news are all over the place. The reciprocal visits, the summary execution of the 4 or 5 generals, some of them were machine gunned and one of them was burned alive. There are all of those things are pointing to an intimate relationship between Hemeti and Tudgatlwag. And you cannot have someone who is allied with one of the parties as holding the file. That does not mean that South Sudan does not appoint someone else, but I am totally against the appointment of one person and then they lend themselves to corruption. That will not work. That's why I suggested that the president is to appoint a national committee made up of 6 or 7 people who are committed to both countries, whose reputation is not tarnished, and who are unbiased with either party. People who can give honest, unbiased advice to the president so that South Sudan does not fall in pitfalls. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Tajkazin. Actually, like right now, seeing the war break out in Sudan between two generals, government of South Sudan has remained neutral between two parties. They didn't support either Ameti or Brown, but they were a big player on the peace to bring these two generals together so they can stop fighting. What do at this time? What do you think regarding about? Do you think what do you think about the government of South Sudan can do to take a side to support which side the government of Juba can support it between Amity and Brown at this time because they are now staying neutral. They are not supporting. They are pushing for peace between two generals to bring the conflict to an end. But seem like the conflict is still ongoing.
Let me take you to the CPA just for a moment.
Mm.
The Declaration of Principles. The Declaration of Principles was 6 points. And a declaration of principles is what the two parties agree to discuss and talk about. It is not one side. That declaration of principle was produced in 1994. I was part of that. Ghadi Salahuddin went from Khartoum, met with Daniel Arab Moy, and he was very rude with him. And he told him, "This is rubbish, we don't want it." The same Ghadi Salahuddin went back in 1998, 4 years later, and accepted the Declaration of Principles. So, just to approve the Declaration of Principles, the mediators, Lazaro Simbueyu, if you remember him, were working for 4 years just to have acceptance of the Declaration of Principles. The negotiations went on from 1998 until 2005, and the transitional period was until 2011. So there is no quick fix. And there are a lot of admirable things about the late Dr. John Garang, one of the top thinkers in the Horn of Africa in his entire history. He always differentiated between the strategic and the tactical. And his strategic was that South Sudan is to be separated. Anything else, I am a witness to that in personal dialogue with him. So to equate the rapid support forces with the Sudanese army and to say South Sudan stands neutral, that's an insult. There is no comparison. The Rapid Support Service, the forces that attacked Khartoum were 57,000. Of those, there is Jerusalem 1 and Jerusalem 2. Those are called Awlad Mansur. Hemeti comes from the Rizegat. Within the Rizegat, he comes from the Mahamid. Within the Mahamid, he comes from Awlad Mansur. This is a small branch of the Mahamid and it's a small branch of the Rizegat. But those two brigades, each of them is 14,000. So this is the main fighting force of Hemeti, these 28,000. The rest is here and there, and some of them, President Bashir at one point called Hemeti and said, this looks like tribal. Why don't you inject some other tribes into the rapid support force? And that's what he did. Those have run away. They either surrendered or they ran away. So he's fighting with his core forces, his own people, 28,000. So to answer your question, this is not a situation where South Sudan stands back and say we are not with each side. This is an insult. This is equating a rebel group, a rebel force, the rapid support forces, they are in support of the army, so they are an integral part of the army. They are not a standalone entity. Making that assumption is a strategic fault. So South Sudan really needs to be clear about that. This is the legal, acknowledged army of South Sudan, and the Rapid Support Force is a rebel group. And the difference between the two is vast. But I don't want, and I hope not, I don't want the president to be dragged into this area. I mean, let some other people muddle if they want to muddle, but we want the president to stay clear, because I am hoping that it will be on the hands of President Salva Kiir that probably some peace will be restored uh, to Sudan. But it cannot, they cannot have it both. And also, I would hope that President Salva Kiir takes a very stern position with Abdulaziz Al Hilo. Unless they want Abdulaziz Al Hilo to take the Kordofan, that will be a different story. And then the relationship will blow out. It will be an animosity. So they have to, because the lifeline of everybody knows that. A 101 student in a university knows that the lifeline of Abdulaziz Al Hilo is South Sudan. Be it supplies, be it support, be it whatever have you. I don't want to elaborate on that, but they need to check him and make sure that he withdraws from all the areas that he has taken and go back to his base. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Taj Kasim. Actually, let me follow up with regarding about this question, because like when Khartoum, those two generals, when Saudi Arabia intervened, when they come in, they said they will make these two general peace. They want Saudi Arabia for peace negotiation, which is that peace failed actually. It didn't go through. So my question, follow up of this, like as Sudan and South Sudan, they are sisters countries. They know one another very well. Why did two Amity and Brown accept to go to Saudi Arabia to do a peace instead of come to Juba for the peace negotiation? Because how we know that, as if you can see, the artists of South Sudan peace agreement was done in Khartoum, and that's what hold the peace right now between the two, Riek Machar and President Salva Kiir. So my question regard, why did the two general agree to go to Saudi Arabia and then blackmail President Salva Kiir? Suppose President Salva Kiir to be the main person playing between two generals, bring peace between two of them. So why did they go there instead of coming to Juba?
That was a mistake. Was it a procedural mistake? Was it a strategic mistake? Was it a tactical mistake? I cannot give a verdict on that, but it was definitely a mistake. And Saudi Arabia in that was excess baggage. It was just to polish the face of the Americans and of this abusive woman who's in charge of the file, without mentioning names. And now they have realized that this was not the right thing to do. None of the ceasefire sessions have actually worked. Burhan came out clearly and he said the RSF are a rebel force and they should be annihilated and they will be court-martialed if they are caught alive. I doubt very much if he will back out of that. Hemeti is looking for recognition. So any platform that will give him recognition, he will take that. This is what Kenya gave him. President of Kenya actually stepped out of his plane in Djibouti, and Mr. Yusuf Izzat, the envoy of Hemeti, was in the same plane. I mean, you don't do things like that and expect to mediate. So yes, the short answer to your question is that that was a mistake. Now there is second thought. Khartoum is brewing a position that we don't want any foreign intervention. This was clear in the response to the IGAT fiasco, and the fiasco was engineered by the Secretary General of the IGAT, who is a very bad person, the President of Djibouti, and the President of Kenya. But the plot has been uncovered, and I doubt very much if Khartoum is going to entertain any uh, foreign intervention. And just let me add that Sudan right now is not of any significance to the Americans or to the West. The interest of the West was an Anglican Christian interest. That was it. Uh, General President Bush and Condoleezza Rice and Sweden and Norway and the United Kingdom. Look at all the big fights, big fights. Look at all the friends of the IGAD. They're all Christians, and they wanted to free South Sudan from Sudan. That has been achieved. I was talking to someone who was very close to the White House, and I was talking about donor fatigue. And he said, Taj, this is no longer donor fatigue, it is compassion fatigue. Nobody cares. So, as you can notice, nobody's just look at the TV screen. You seldom find in the Western media anything about South Sudan. There is an article here and there from those cowboys who go to Africa as if it is Livingstone days, but there is no genuine interest in the issue of Sudan or even in the war of Sudan. There is lip service, what we call political correctness. They just want to say the right thing without doing the right thing. And there is a very big difference between the two. So the answer to your question is that that was a mistake. It is being corrected now. And I doubt very much if Khartoum is going to go to Jeddah again. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Taj Kazim. You answered very correctly. Thank you so much for that. My next question regarding about the oil. There is a fear that the RSF may interrupt the oil flowing, and and I see one of the articles they put out last week. They demand South Sudan government that their demand need to be addressed, or they will shut down the oil flowing. And I see that that representative said last week that, oh, that's not what happened. So what is your opinion regarding about that issue? What is your, can you give us the wisdom on that? Because oil is a lifeline of both two countries. So if they interrupt, because as you see now, and people are fear, if RSF is going to lose this war, they probably go on. They said they have nothing to lose. They will go ahead and then damages the oil pipeline that running to their territory. So, what is your wisdom on this question? Can you give us these issues about oil flowing? Thank you.
Well, what the RSF did is what we call in chemistry litmus test. The litmus test is when you put a certain piece of paper with certain chemicals to see
Right.
if it is going to change color, and if it changes color to this or that, then you have got a reading. This was a litmus test to say, well, we have got that card, we have got a card in our hands. And then of course Mr. Yusuf Izzat came out and said, no, that is not correct, it is fabrication, we will never do that. It is true that the RSF has taken control of Higli, and this is the only place really. The rest of the stuff is in South Sudan, and the rest of the stuff is in Sudan. And the real valve that can be shut is Bashir in Port Sudan, the export. There are 4 or 5 companies who are doing the export, and all the oil of South Sudan is going to China. So this is where Khartoum can actually shut the valve. No more shipping. Uh, if the RSF continue to threaten, and if I were South Sudan, I will send a joint force, massive force, between the South Sudan People Defense Forces and the Sudanese army and annihilate the RSF in Higlig and free the station. If they blow it up, it can be repaired. It is valves and pipes, really. There is no sophistication in that kind of stuff. And I doubt very much if they will dare uh, to do that, because then they will have China on their back. So for me, it was a litmus test. For me, it was to say, well, we are not only fighting in Khartoum, but we can cause regional damage. I wouldn't take that threat seriously. They are not that stupid. But I think South Sudan needs to stand up and say anybody who messes around with our oil is going to have the wrath of the South Sudan People's Defense Forces. If somebody is threatening you by force, you need to reply by force. You cannot tap on his shoulder. 98%, 95% to 98% of the gross domestic product of South Sudan is coming from oil. If the oil is disrupted, the people in South Sudan will go hungry. We don't want that to happen. So Juba really needs to call a spade, need to be frank, need to make a completely clear stand that we are not going to tolerate even a threat regarding our lifeline. And it is not with Hemeti in the longer term. If I were Khartoum and if South Sudan is not clear, South Sudan is now paying $18 per barrel for passage. I would shut the valve and say I want $30, just as retaliation. So don't underestimate, Juba should not underestimate the cards that in the hands of Khartoum. And by Khartoum, I mean the army and the incumbent government. In political science, to do anything, you need a government of the day. You need a sitting government to deal with it. So there is no way that Juba would say, well, we are standing on equal distance from both. That's not acceptable. That's an insult. And that's going to ruin, not deteriorate, it's going to ruin the relationship between Khartoum and Juba. There is a government, it is the army now is the only legitimacy that Sudan has. There is no government. It is the army, and the army is fighting. So it's either support for that portfolio, or if you stand back, then you are not supporting. This is not with or against. This is either with or against. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Tajskadin. My next question regarding about the role of the Egyptian government. So, what do you think, or what do you want the government, Egyptian government, can play? Can Egyptian government is playing a role between this country, between two general fighting? Which side is government of Egypt? So, what is it, Ameti or Abran?
Egypt is probably in a fix. They are caught between the two jigsaws. The Egyptians, when they look south of Aswan, they don't see people, they don't see land, they only see water.
Mm.
And their quest since 1904, the birth of the Jungule Canal, until today, is to siphon out 4.5 billion cubic meters of water from the Sud wetlands. That's it. The whole involvement, the whole missions is around that. And their equipment now, 4 or 5 of the drug lines have been assembled. They have been put in boats, and they are actually ready to dredge Bahar Naam all the way into Lake No, and then probably they will go back up to Jur River, which is coming from Siu and Sobat. And I was called by the presidency, and I was spent 5 weeks in Juba, and we did public consultations. And the overwhelming opinion of the people, that's if the government cares for the opinion of the people, is that nothing should be done without credible evidence-based feasibility studies. And then the Council of Ministers, and I have got the resolution of the Council of Ministers, I have got a copy of it, that yes, nothing is to be done. And the President's instructions, nothing is to be done without these studies. But the dredging is going on, and it will cause a lot of damage. And then the Egyptians have given breadcrumbs to South Sudan. A school here, a hotel. South Sudan needs a four-star hotel. And so that's one side where the Egyptians don't want to lose South Sudan. And then with Khartoum, Sudan is a passage country. There is no real water generated or originating from Sudan. The water of the Blue Nile is generating from Ethiopia, and the water of the White Nile is generating from the Lake region and Sobat River. So South Sudan is a major contributor together with Ethiopia and with all the tributaries and with Bahr al-Ghazal Basin. So there are intricate interests of Egypt in South Sudan. They cannot do anything without Sudan because the longest run of the White Nile and the main Nile is in Sudan. It is from around Melut up to Wadi Halfa, just south of Old Wadi Halfa, just south of Aswan. I doubt very much if the Egyptians will do an overt military intervention to help the government. Covert, yes, maybe they can give them some ammunition, they can give them some spare parts for the airplanes, whatever have you. But General President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi made it clear that he does not want any foreign intervention in the issue of Sudan. And I really appreciate, I hope he's true to his word, and I really appreciate that position. Let the Sudanese, they want to fight, let them fight. They want to make peace, let them make peace, but no intervention. And I think he's stopping others diplomatically from having overt interventions in this messy file. But to answer your question briefly, I don't think that Egypt is going to take an overt, open support, sending planes as some people are circulating. I have no evidence that there is actually military support. Uh, God knows it has not come out yet. And the other thing is, I raise my hat for Egypt really. Over 150,000 Sudanese have crossed the border into Egypt. They have caused immense troubles in Cairo. The rent of flats has shot up 300, 400, 500%. The show of people with different facial features in the streets of Cairo, a lot of areas have turned into Sudanese ghettos. So we cannot blame Egypt. They are doing quite a bit of good. They have got stringent measures now. I don't blame them at all. But I doubt very much if Egypt will come out openly siding militarily or politically against one side or the other. However, they are still in contact with the government in Khartoum, and they are one of the few countries of the Nile rivers who have not enjoyed, who have not given a chance to an envoy of the RSF to come and talk to them. They have not received anyone. I hope that answers your question. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, you did. Thank you, Professor Taikazin. My next question is regarding, but it will be one and two questions, but it's one question. First, let seeing the war break out in Khartoum, we have seen international community went in there, take their people out from Khartoum. I live in overseas, they took their people out from Khartoum. And and one that was that I have seen some of the news media outlet report and people talk about the war going on in Khartoum right now. It There are Western countries are playing a huge role in it, like also to U.S. and uh, and also Russia. So they see that Russia. Do you think that the Russia is playing and U.S. are playing? They're having a part of this conflict going on in Khartoum. That question number one, and follow up to the one you answered that. What can international community can do to stop the war in Khartoum in Sudan?
Okay, let me answer both questions. The first one, it's not a secret that during the days of Bashir,
Hmm.
he gave permission for a military base for Wagner right at the borders between Sudan and the Central African Republic. The base is still there. Wagner people, they move out when they are pressured and then they come back. But that was done during the days of Bashir and it was done officially. Russia made a request, Sudan accepted it, and they gave them an area and a permission and they moved their people. And that's documented. Uh, I am not aware of anything else. They had a gold mine around Abu Hamad in the northern parts. When the Nile goes up, before it comes down, Abu Hamad is up there. They had a gold mine there, a Russian company, but they have abandoned it, and now it is available. It was actually somebody contacted me from Sudan to see if there is a Canadian company interested to take over. So I am not aware of any commercial stroke mining interest still in Sudan. There is no evidence of that. And I have got proof. They sent me documents that this block is no longer in the hands of the Russian company. Uh, I I never used the term international community. This was a ploy, this was a trick done by the West to make the West something bigger. We have the global North, the EU and the United States and Canada. We have the global East, and that is China, India, and those guys. Those are one third of the total population of the world. China is 1.3 billion people, and India is 1.4 billion people, quarter of the total population of the world. And then we have the global South, which is us, Africa and Latin America. But to make things bigger, I mean, do you hear anything from Latin America about global issues? Brazil, Argentina, Costa Rica, nothing. They are
Yeah.
living in a world of their own, and they are massive people. So there is nothing. This was a ploy that the people swallowed, but I don't see any international community. It is the West, it is the EU, the United States, and Canada. This is the core. I mean, the rest is just to make it a little bit bigger. And as I said earlier, the days of George W. Bush and Susan Rice and the Angelican approach to the Sudan and other countries, that's finished. I doubt very much if America will appoint an envoy. There is talk about that. I doubt very much if they will do that. I doubt very much if Joe Biden will stop at at a mic and speak about the issues in Sudan. Look at the kind of people who are talking now. There are third, fourth, fifth rank who are doing that. Blinken sometimes comes here and then. He's a very arrogant man. And as soon as he turns away from the mic, he forgets about Sudan. So I don't bank very much on that. And I don't think that anybody is right now has the will, because whatever you talk about, if you don't have the will to take it through, it's not going to happen. And what Sudan needs is a process and not the meeting of the two people. That approach is catastrophic. This is not a war between two equals where you want them to talk it out and shake hands. Burhan will never do that. Hemeti will never do that. The hurting, the injury, and the death. When Burhan was attacked, he was holding his gun and shooting with his bodyguard. 35 of them died in front of his eyes. These kinds of things will never be forgotten. A lot of people died from the army, a lot of ambushes, especially in the eastern Nile around Khartoum. These are soldiers, these are his soldiers and officers. Generals have been arrested. So there is no way that there will be a shake hand, and there is no quick fix, and there is no side road to take people to peace. So what do we need? A process. As soon as you say process, people will start running away, because process needs commitment, process needs funding. The CPA cost the friends of the IGAD $125 million paid into Kenya for hosting the negotiations between 1998 and 2005. You need a retreat, like what General Simbuyo did. He took people out because the media is one of the enemies of peace processes. You don't want things to leak out until there is an agreement. And then the guarantors. Look at the Juba agreement. Look at the agreement between General Gachwik and Juba. They talked for 3 days, they signed an agreement, and nothing happened. So, for any tranquility in Sudan, for any return to normality or partial normality, we need a process. The process needs process design. Process design needs experts. It does not need politicians. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Taj Kazin. My next question regarding about humanitarian between both two countries. As we know that 2.5 or even less million people of South Sudanese that were living in Khartoum in part of Sudan. And seeing the war break out, there are a lot of refugees between both two countries. There some went to Chad, some went to Egypt, some even went to Libya, some came to South, and that's a huge. And we see so much death and starvation in the refugees area across that neighbors country. And also, to I hear last week that the Chad were fighting on the border, with the Chad border in Sudan, and there was a war there going on. And civilians are caught in the middle here. So, what do you want to give advice to United Nation, Sudan government, and the rebel and South Sudan government? What would they want to do more to save life for these civilians that are caught in the war between two countries?
You can't imagine the compassion from South Sudan. I received a very touching message
Hmm.
from one of the governors of one of the very important states. All the states are important, but this is prominent. And the message actually brought tears to my eyes when I was reading it. He was saying that he's willing to give the Sudanese refugees land, and if they need shelter, he's willing to build uh, areas for them to stay in. without the intervention of the UNHCR or IOM or anyone. It was a personal gesture from him. And the issue of refugees is a delicate one, because it shows that a country did what they can and shared what they have with people who were in need. So the social message, the humanitarian message, is very strong. As we speak now, there are 80,000 plus Sudanese uh, people in Juba, and a very influential person in charge of this file or part of those in charge. He called me on the phone and he told me that he gave me the figure that this 80,000 plus in Juba alone,
Wow.
and that they are being put in camps not because they are considered refugees, but because the government of South Sudan hasn't got the resources to feed them. So they have to be classified as refugees so that they can get support from the UNHCR. And I accepted the argument. I know the situation. I know that Juba is cash strapped. They have a lot on their plate. The elections are coming, so a census has got to be done. A constitution has got to be put in place, and all the rest of completing the revitalized agreement. So that was a good gesture. Really, what is lacking with the silence of the president? I cannot understand why President Salva Kiir is not coming out time and again, welcoming the people, making statements, supporting, taking Abdulaziz Al Hilu, making sure that there are no counter or offensive statements by any of his officials, or equating Hemeti with Al Burhan. This is an insult. With all due respect to Hemeti, but he is not an equal to Burhan. Burhan is the commander in chief of the Sudanese armed forces. Nobody during the struggle, the 21 years struggle by the SPLM, SPLA, no one ever equated John Garang with anybody else, dead or alive. With all due respect to all the martyrs, all the fathers and mothers of South Sudan, he was kept in a place of his own. This is where Al Burhan is today. He's the savior, the possible savior, the only savior that I see for the people of South Sudan who are being attacked in their own homes, who are being looted, and there is criminality. What is happening, what is being done by the RSF is criminality. It's not a war. There is no cause in that. You cannot win the hearts of people by going into their homes and destroying it, stealing their property and raping their girls. So what South Sudan can do in a nutshell is to call a spade, and to make sure that they are on the side of the legitimacy and whatever we have of it. It is the only legitimacy that we have. One thing I would wish to add here for your viewers is the issue of fragility. South Sudan is a fragile state, and so is Sudan is a fragile state. And the political scientists say that fragility has got three legs. We call it ALC: authority, legitimacy, and capacity. All three are not there in Sudan. There is no legitimacy really because there is no government. There is no authority because now it is the army, but there is no civilian authority. And there is no capacity because everybody who has capacity have left the country. Factories, Dal Group, all the installations of Dal Group, which were the biggest national investment, they have all been destroyed. Markets have been destroyed. Storage capacity. So it is important that we would like to see President Salva Kiir coming out and clearly saying, I am on the side of the people, and putting something on the table. My suggestion to them was to loan Sudan 5,000 barrels of oil to be returned in 5 years. It will not make South Sudan poorer. It will not make North Sudan, in the Sudan, richer. But it is a gesture. We feel you. We feel the pain. We know you need cash. We need to pay salaries. For heaven's sake, oil is passing through you. Take 5 million barrels, return it in 5 years. And anything else, a shipment, just a plane load to go to Port Sudan with dura, with maize, with sugar, anything to say that we feel the need of the people and this is our contribution. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Taj. There is an important question that one of our viewers watching you right now just sending in, which is a very good question that I want forward to you. The person who has question is his name is Walmoranya. He asking you that Professor Taika, what is the position of Arab leagues with regarding conflict in Sudan? So what the Arab League are doing regarding of the war going on in Khartoum?
The League of Arab Nations is a paper tiger, and they don't have authority to do anything. It is the lip service. We condemn this, we condemn that, we support this, we support that. There are no funds to be paid. They don't have collective armies to move in and stabilize peace. Peace has got three stages: peacemaking, peacekeeping, and peace building. The League of Arab Nations doesn't have that. And the big question is, does Sudan really belong to the Arab League? If you remember when they applied to join the Arab League in 1958, 1959, if I remember right, there were objections that these are Africans, these are not Arabs. Lebanon objected. Lebanon was very strong at that time. They objected openly, no, we don't want them to join the Arab League. And the Arabs in Sudan came by infiltration. There was never a conquest like what happened in Egypt. There was never a conquest by the Arabs. And I cannot understand why a country that spreads from the equator to latitude 22, all of it in Africa, why do they classify themselves as an Arab nation? Why do they join the Arab League? I am a staunch opposer of that. And I think this was a mistake then. It is a mistake now. When I was a student at the University of Khartoum, I met with Nelson Mandela when he came to Sudan, and the Aboud government gave him a diplomatic passport to move around. Those were the days when the Africanism of Sudan was clear and prominent. I hope this will come back, and I don't really hold any respect for the League of Arab States or Arab nations, and I don't think that they have the capacity to intervene in such a complex and intricate, bloody river for violence like the one that we have in Sudan. And to answer the question, really, I consider them a redundant body in an issue of this nature. I would hope that there are Horn of Africa solutions to and more cooperation and more coordination in good faith uh, to solve the issue in Sudan. But I don't see the League of Arab Nations as a player, as they have proved that they are not a player in the issue of the GERD. Uh, the great Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. A lot of lip service, a lot of talk, a lot of communiques, and Ethiopia tells them to go and fly a kite. Thank you.
Uh, thank you, Professor Taj Kazin. Thank you. I should follow up this. This is an interesting question, and I always wondering, why is it Sudan considered themselves as the Arab country, while it's in Africa? Because Northern Sudan and Egypt are part of Africa continent, you know, and but they consider them as Arab country. So as you can see, this war just breaking up, will there will be a change coming up? Because as you see, this, my question is going direct to, like we see now, seeing the war break out, there are some of like Darfur, Nuba Mountain, Blue Nile. They are trying to break away from Sudan. So my question to you, can you give us more your knowledge about what will be the future of United Sudan, like Northern Sudan? It will be break into small pieces, like Darfur will leave, like as we see they declare themselves, they want to give themselves Nuba Mountain and Kordofan. Do you think these people, this region will separate from the North Arab, because they will consider now, okay, we are the Arab in the North marginalized in 1956. Now this war give us a chance now to rule ourselves. We don't need more marginalization from the Arab. So what do you think about this question?
Let me take the first part of the question. There are certain constituents
Hmm.
uh, of identifying a state or a nation. One of the major characteristics is what we call the tonality. The
Hmm.
tonality is the type of music and beats and so on that you have. Sudan, Ethiopia, South Sudan, Eritrea, Djibouti, Somalia, and most of Africa are on what we call pentatonic music, pentatonic uh, uh, tonality. And that's the music on five notes. The rest of the world, uh, Europe, uh, America, North America, they are on heptatonic or seven notes. So are the Arab maqamat, al-maqamat al-Arabiya or the Arabic maqamat. They are either seven, eight, or nine, depending on who is doing the research. They are all on heptatonic. There isn't a single Arab country in the Middle East or beyond the Arabian Peninsula that are on pentatonic. So when the Arabs and the major influx came either after the invasion of Abdullah ibn Abi Sarh to Aswan, he never came to Dungula, but mostly at the peak of the Fatimite kingdom, and they are the ones who established Cairo. That's why it's called Qahirat al-Mu'izz, Cairo of al-Mu'izz, and al-Mu'izz lidin Allah al-Fatimi. And the Fatimites are claiming to be descendants of Fatima, the daughter of Prophet Muhammad. When the Fatimites established Cairo, I mean, it was completely different from the desert that the Arabs had. And then the Arab soldiers, they started to become arrogant. So the Fatimites told them, "Well, we are sending you back to Saudi Arabia, to the desert." And then they brought Russians and they brought Caucasus and so on, and they formed their army without the Arabs. Well, those Arabs tasted the water of the Nile and they decided not to go back. So they infiltrated into Sudan. That was the major influx. And if you go to Kordofan and Darfur now, and you go to the major Arab tribes, Miseria, Rizegat, Habania, and so on, their music is still on the maqamat. It is still heptatonic. It is on seven notes. While the rest of Sudan, Kordofan coming down until the Red Sea, they are all on pentatonic. And if you take the colloquial language of Sudan, probably 35, 40% of it is Nubian terminology that have been Arabized. And if you go with the Sudanese version of Arabic, if you go to Algeria or Morocco or Tunisia or even remote parts of Saudi Arabia, it will be a pigeon language to them. They may not understand what the person is saying. So I believe that Sudan needs to redefine its identity. And there was a time when, after Patrice Lumumba was assassinated, his followers actually came to Sudan through South Sudan with their gold, and their gold was kept for them in the Bank of Sudan. So those ties during the reign of Bashir, those African ties were actually cut. And whoever is in charge now or will be in charge in the future will need to redefine that. With South Sudan, uh, during what I call the Angelical approach, which ended up in the separation of South Sudan, I mean, all that was driven by Angelical countries. And the pity now is, as that job is done, there isn't really keen interest. And I remember when we were working on the uh, CPA, the final version, if you go to the CPA file, you will find that it's at 262 pages. 101 of them is the implementation matrix, how to implement the agreement. And it was that who actually made the agreement work. And Hilda Johnson, that was treated very badly by the South Sudanese, Hilda Johnson was the mastermind behind that 101 pages. And without those 101 pages, which spelled out how the agreement is to be implemented, when and by who and with what resources, it was a piece of professional art that made the agreement possible. So I believe that there are lots of commonalities between Sudan and South Sudan, and South Sudan is not going to come back. South Sudan is now an independent country. 98.83% or something like that, over 98% voted for separation. You cannot ignore that. You also cannot ignore the 2 million South Sudanese who paid with their lives so that South Sudan becomes an independent country. And we have got to respect the sovereignty of both countries. However, the ties are there. What I call interdependencies. The interdependencies are, if you have got something that I need and I have got something that you need, then there are interdependencies, and that will create meaningful relations rather than lip service. This has been a very inspiring and very interesting session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Taikazin. My last question, so that I can give you a chance,
Sure.
so you can put in what you have, is what would be the solution of this war in Khartoum? This is it? Do you think that this war will be the long-term war, because now it's a civil war already? So, do you think this war will drag on to be a long-term, or what will be the solution? Bring this conflict to an end?
Being a keen researcher on political science, I don't. I am not into crystal balling. I never do crystal balling. I never say that this year and that is going to happen. Then I have far more modesty than that. So crystal balling is out. My reading is that, just looking at the balance of powers, the SAF are going to win the war. Yes, there is collateral damage. Yes, there are friendly fires. Yes, there is destruction. Yes, there are casualties. But this is a dirty war. There are very few clean wars where you just hit one target, you destroy a dam, and so that's a clean war. A dirty war is when innocent people are hurt, and that is the case. At the end of the day, there is no way that the RSF can beat the South. There is no way. The kind of armament, the number of personnel, and now the support of the people because of the misconduct, because of the inhumanity of the SAF members. I am not talking about their leadership. Uh, there is very strong anti-sentiments. The only thing they can do is to take the cars that they have stolen and go somewhere in the West. You talked about possible uh, segmentation, disintegration of the current state. Why not? Why not? There are so many countries that have split and split again. On the other hand, diversity does not mean that people cannot coexist in one place. Look at Canada. South Sudan is about 640,000 square kilometers. Sudan is about, I think, 1.4, 1.5 million square kilometers. Canada is 10.5 million square kilometers. And we are living in peace. The Francophones, the Anglophones, and the original people. Yes, we are murmuring. Yes, people complain, but that's normal. But walking in the street, nobody will shoot at you because you are Aboriginal or shoot at you because you are a Francophone. So peaceful coexistence, even within diversity, is possible. Take Belgium. Belgium is also partly Flemish and partly French. There is a division. There are different capitals, the different languages, different education systems, but they coexist within one political entity. What does this require? It requires compromise. It requires laws that are put in place and observed. It requires recognition. But before that, we need a healing process. The hurting in Sudan has been immense, and there is need for a healing process. Let me take you to the example of Rwanda. People are now hailing Rwanda, and you go into Kigali as if you are in Europe. Yes. When Paul Kagame won the war, he came into Kigali. He came with a political project, and that is lacking in Sudan and lacking in South Sudan. Nobody is talking or thinking about a political project. Paul Kagame's political project was made up of 2 points. Very simple. A political project doesn't have to be a scientific paper. It needs an inspiring leader to do that. And his political project was based on 2 points. The first point was from today on, nobody will say that I am Tutsi or Hutu. Tribalism. Why? It is a criminal offense, you go to jail. The second point was reconciliation. The government and the setups were looking for who killed the family of who burned the village of who, and he cleared the chest of those people. 3 or 4 years of community-based conflict resolution. He prepared the country for some kind of unity and some kind of a new dawn, and he made it. We need things like that. We need political projects, but political projects come from leaders. Let me share this with you. One time I was in Addis Ababa, staying at the Hilton Hotel, and General Obasanjo was staying at the same hotel. This is the time when he became president as a general, and then he moved away and he let the political process go on. Then he was elected as president through the ballot box. So I met him in between. So I invited him for lunch and we started talking. Every time I said African leaders, he would look at me And General Obasanjo is a giant. He's probably 6'6", probably weighs, I don't know, maybe 80 or 90 or 100 kilograms. He would look at me with a stare like that. And our brothers and sisters in West Africa are different from us in East Africa. We are more soft. They're very blunt. So when I repeated African leaders after several times, he looked at me and said, "Look here, young man. In Africa, there are no leaders. There are only rulers." And that was a statement of wisdom. There is a very big difference between a ruler and a leader. The leader listens to the people. The leader puts the interests of the people forefront of any other interest. We need that. We need that in Sudan. We need that in South Sudan. And I don't see Sudan reintegrating. I don't see it recollecting. I don't see it coming to a unity without an inspiring leader, which does not exist right now, which is a pity. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you think that the power should be handing over to military, I mean to civilian instead of military ruler? Because we known Sudan has been known as every time as the president is changed by force. Do you? And we have seen for the last few years that before the former president Umar Bashir was overthrown. So, do you think that the power should be given to civilian rule instead of military rule? That will end the conflict in Sudan.
There is one of my good friends and one of the Canadian academists who know the Horn of Africa in the palm of their hand. His name is John Young, Dr. John Young. John Young wrote a book and he said the nation state model of governance is not suitable for the Horn of Africa. And he's right. When Vasco da Gama and Christopher Columbus and those guys from Portugal set out, one of their missions was to civilize the local people, to come to Africa to civilize us who are not civilized. Let me give you two examples. One time, one of the people in Khartoum, Dr. Lawrence Woolwool, was staying with me at home. And this guy said, why is this slave, in Arabic he said, Abid, why is this slave staying in your home? I said, this is not a slave. This he has got a PhD from the Sorbonne, the queen of universities in France. And he's a very polished and refined, and he's my friend. He said, these guys, they're not civilized. They don't even know how to say thank you. So I shut him up. And when I went back home, I asked Lawrence, is it true that in the Dinka literature, thank you does not exist? He said, yes. I said, why not? He said, the reason is that in the Dinka culture, we believe that what you do for your fellow human being does not deserve a thank you. It is your duty. Look at this finesse. Look at this civility. Another example is when the husband dies, the next of kin is obliged to marry the wife and keep the children. And the newborns carry the name of the deceased person, not of the biological father. Look at that social finesse. Look at the meaning coming out of that to protect the children and to protect the wife. And then Islam and Christianity came to Africa and they messed up the whole thing. They messed up all these beautiful tribal systems that were governing the lives of people. I don't think that jumping into Westminster style governance is going to solve the problems in Sudan. The people are not ready. A colleague of mine at Carleton University said, democracy is a process. Democratic governance is an outcome. Just look at that. It is very simple, but very wise. So you cannot move from military to civilians simply because you bring people who are wearing suits instead of people who are wearing the khaki uniforms of the army. That democracy will not happen, does not happen like that. The process will have to be set. Where are the political parties now? Where is the Umma party? Where is the DUP? Where is the Communist Party? The platform, the building blocks for a civilian democratic governance do not exist in Sudan. Those will have to be built. What is the transitional? It is a big question mark. People have to agree on it. After 1964 uprising and after 1985 uprisings, the army took over for a couple of years and very gracefully they handed over the governance to the parliament. Suar al-Dahab walked straight to the parliament, took off his cap, and he released his powers to the parliament after 2 years. So it does not happen overnight. So in our research, in our advocacy, in interactions like this, we need to entertain and we need to dig deeper into what that transitional period can be. What are its components? What support does it need? But to jump from A to B and to just change their clothes and hand over to people simply because they are wearing suits will not happen. Can you have a Westminster democracy system without political parties? There is no way. Look at the United States. There are two parties. The rest are small, but the main there are two parties. United Kingdom, there are two parties. France, there are two or three parties. But they are solid political parties who have got following, and people go to the ballot boxes with programs, with agenda. That cannot happen overnight in Sudan. It's not happening in South Sudan either. Do we have a democracy in South Sudan now? A big question mark. So I think we need to, and this is an area for research, research by professionals, not by politicians. What is the modus operandi? What is the module that can be put in place, supported, encouraged, buttressed, that will take the Sudanese people from the status quo of today into the at least the first steps of a civilian governance. But it is not a handing over. The handing over was tried before and it failed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Taj Kazin. Right now, I will give you a floor to put in your last statement before we end the show. Thank you very much.
Uh, Thank you very much. I consider myself a dual citizen of both Sudan and South Sudan. And some of my friends in Juba were suggesting that I should be given an honorary South Sudanese citizenship. And a good friend of mine is working on that now. He tried to work on it before, but documents got lost. They're working on it now. If it happens or not, I don't need a citizenship. I have got a Canadian citizenship and a Sudanese citizenship. So I don't need an additional identity. But I'm very concerned about the sanctions. And South Sudan will not develop unless the sanctions are removed. A very good man, my colleague and my friend, Dr. Francis Deng, is working on that with the blessing of the president. I am very much interested in helping with that. So I don't want to be conceived as delving into South Sudanese issues as if I'm an outsider. I am not. When the president decided to do the public consultations on the Sud and the draining of Bahar Ni'am, I was hired by the presidency upon the instructions of the president, and I was there for 5 weeks. And I led the deliberations as senior consultant, and we delivered a big volume of recommendations to the presidency. But I want to conclude with a piece of information that was sent to me today. The president, a couple of days back, received the accreditation documents of 10 countries in one day. They all came and they gave their accreditations to the president, and he received them. 10 of them. 9 of those were non resident ambassadors, including a country like Denmark. Denmark, during the transitional period, was in charge of the joint donor mission in South Sudan. There were a number of countries, they formed this coalition and they put money into it, and Denmark and its embassy were managing the joint donor team. So the what pained me is that out of those 10 ambassadors that came to see the president, only one was a resident ambassador, and that's the ambassador of the UK. The other 9 were non-resident. Why not? Why such a large number? And these are not all. These are the ones who tendered their documents that day. 9 of them were non-resident. What can a non-resident ambassador actually do? He's resident somewhere else where his family is, where his main base is, and then he takes the plane, he comes in for a few days, he meets with politicians, he meets with ministers, and then he takes his plane and go away. Another very strange thing that I noticed is that the ambassador of North Korea, the People's Republic of Korea, the staunch enemy of the United States. The United States is giving South Sudan $1 billion per year as aid for a very long time now. No money into the government, no money into development, only humanitarian. They are feeding the people. And then there is this reception for a non-resident ambassador of North Korea. What is the relationship? What can be of benefit to the people of South Sudan by having an exchange of ambassadors with North Korea who are firing rockets every 2 or 3 days, sometimes twice in a day? So to conclude and to thank you for your hosting, we need a serious revision of the way we in South Sudan look at foreign policy and how we deal with it, where our interests lie. We also need to be mindful of the needs of the people around us. Our relationship with Ethiopia needs to be special. Our relationship with Sudan needs to be special. Our relationship with Uganda and Kenya needs to be special. Those are the close people to us. And unless you have got other questions, I hope that this has been useful to you and to your audience. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Kazin. I think we are coming to conclude. This should be the last interview with you. I just want to say on behalf of Lakeside Media, we just want to say I will feel our gratitude to you for accept our invitation to come and give us this important event going on in both countries, South Sudan and Sudan. Of course, you are a South Sudanese citizen. You don't even need a passport to be a citizen. You're already a South Sudanese citizen, and we always admire you for stand with the people of South Sudan, seeing during a civil war at this present moment. So we thank you so much for being a part of us. So, and you are part of that country belong to all of us. So you are South Sudan citizen. I would like to say thank you so much for coming in and have a wonderful weekend. And I will talk to you more if that we will bring you more so that we can have this open dialogue so that these issues going on in Sudan and South Sudan can be solved, because we need two countries to have a peace. So to come, so civilian are separate. So this is one of the things that I just would like to say. So thank you for coming in. I appreciate it. It was a very wonderful discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much for hosting me, and bye-bye. Take care.
Bye.
God bless.
And you too. Thank you. God bless you too. Thank you. And thank you all for our BOS. We'll see you next
Pibor, Ping William, Atoin Juba, Malatori, hey, yo, Ping William, Atoin Benti, Walla Quaju, hey, wow, Ping William, Atoin Malkal, Walla Pinyaram, Ping William.